Good evening on what is a cool, grey and overcast day. It is Wednesday the 29th of June and I'm in the Read Nook with a nice hot cup of tea. And a box to open. So let's find out what is in here. Don't know yet. Just unpack it. And what I have is several things, in fact. This is, well, what I've got here is a copy of Mazes. Mazes is a fantasy role-playing reforged, a modern take upon classic fantasy dungeon RP. With a single polyhedral die and the power of your imagination, can you defeat the maze controller with sword, sorcery and shadow? It's lightning fast and easy to master. Mazes returns us to the dungeons where we first battled dragons with an award-winning, unique approach to fantasy role-playing. Open the door to adventure if you're brave enough, and this is from 9th level games. So I've got quite a nice, bright, cheery illustration inside, and then the same again on the back. And then you get inside. We open with the invocation, and essentially, so almost looking like a price list, but that's the contents page. And then part one, so guide to role playing, and also telling a story together, playing a game to find out what happens, what is role playing. And it's also got the question: is this Dungeons and Dragons? There are dungeons, there might be dragons. There are definitely funny little dice. No, this isn't that specific game, but it is fantasy role-playing. This is Mazes Fantasy Roleplaying, rules for adventurers entering darkness in dangerous places, seeking treasure and glory. What do you need to play? Quick guide to the funny dice. And then you see, so what should it look like? The role of the maze controller, obviously the game master, normally. And then we're getting into a bit of background, and essentially this is the Broken Age. There was a war, though none alive remember it. Even if an elf with a century of years was born after the fall, there was an apocalypse. Perhaps it was an endless series of wars and not a single Armageddon. A sorcerer's war between which kingdoms? A battle between brothers or races? A war of mad gods? We may never know. What is known that there are ruins of plenty from that time. Trinkets and treasures that tell of an age before, an age of power, an age of riches. So that's the setup. And it's also telling you it's an age of mortals, an age of darkness, an age of ignorance and fear. This is the age of the maze. And so it really sort of like kind of setting you up with what is this game, what it's about. It's constantly answering that question. What is a maze? It's a door to adventure. It involves swords against darkness, rulings over rules. So it is an OSR style game. Rolling the dice. The action, the save, and the effect. Essentially, there are really just the rules in a nutshell. Or think that's a bird, possibly a cloak in a nutshell. Depending upon whether or not it's an African or European swallow. Advantage. So essentially, classic kind of classic rules for advantages and disadvantage. And then weirdly, 7 resolutions involving books, blades, bones, key and crown, chaos. I think these are sort of like the key parts of the sort of like the scenario, and then rolls and rolls. So we have the particular kind of classes what you would talk about them, but essentially occupations and roles within the game. So we've got the Paragon, the Vanguard, and the Fighter, the Sentinel, and these are all character types. Resources. Fantastic, nicely done piece of illustration there. I do like that. And again, just doing all of the mechanics. But not all actions can be accomplished by rolling dice. In some situations, performing the action requires spending a resource to accomplish the goal. These are costs that you pay by the players or the maze controller. These actions tend to be large and impactful. You have Hearts, which is the character's life force energy. Stars, which is essentially the special power he has, and then regardless of their aspect, the character can always spend a star to establish something about the game world and their character, such as creating friends and contacts, hand-waving details, and declaring new things about the character or their world's past. So there's an element of sort of like also world building at the same time, and then as they play, the characters generate darkness, essentially, which is both a resource for the maze controller and a signpost to the players of how dangerous the current situation has become. So that's interesting. A lot of cases, they're tracking the amount of light they have or something like that. Again, you have this kind of count. It's here you've got to kind of count down where it goes from bright torchlit to bleak. So 1, 2, 3, it's dark. Darkness appears. 4, 5, 6, darkness appears. 7 plus darkness. So essentially, it's just sort of like instead of a countdown, it's a count up. And then the epilogue, essentially, after you've done that adventure, you come back, and that's just like the first section of the book. Dealing with expenses and advances and conditions and so on, all things that have got to be dealt with by your character. Before we get into, we see aspects. And aspects is a way that a character approaches the world. In mazes, aspects are useful groupings used to divide up character types or to provide some additional background. So sword aspect, I solve problems by the edge of my sword. Shadow aspect, I solve problems from the embrace of the shadow. I solve problems with my eldritch sorcery. And it does have classes, and they are based upon your aspect. So you've got monster slayers, and then we get onto the edges associated with that, so on. Deal with society and things like wishes. No wises. These are all more edges, magic, lineage, advances, interlude, sort of like in between moments during a delve. On creating a character, so there's quite a lot to actually explain before you get to creating a character. But the thing is, it's actually still, nevertheless, it's actually a fairly the book has got a fairly large typeface, so it's fairly easy to read and go through. And then essentially it rules for guidelines for iconic characters versus iconic heroes versus dramatic characters. Unlike many of the dungeon crawling and exploration style games, Mazes is not focused on long-term character development. You are not grinding out experience to gain levels of power. If you choose to play with the same character over a long period, we'll see that character grow and change, but the growth is not the primary motivator. The original, okay, so it's interesting. So here's we've got aims, objectives which you can sort of like grow into, I'm presuming. So that's the sword and shadow. Then we have sorcery classes with extra cattail. You know, so for that we've got adventurous small folk and blazing magician. Cursed Tomb Raider, dangerous Bravo, excellent vagabond, filthy urchin, guild mage, haunted librarian. Probably driven out of the library by the ghosts. Infernal summoner, jaded sellsword. Knockabout ranger, the last elf. Monster slayer, nighthawk assassin. So quite a lot of classes in here. So outcast, bugbear, puzzling locksmith. I do outcast bugbear. That's an interesting one to get opt as a kind of class. Savage barbarian, talented thief. Unless of course these are monsters. Underground druid, valiant dragoon, and so on. Interlude. Then I've got on magic. Domains, but domains are sky, sea, forge, earth. So you can create interesting characters that way as well. Night, conjuration. These are all essentially your schools of magic. Illumination, enchantment. And each of these, you know, basically. So for summoning, you've got lesser summons and greater summons. So if it's sky, it's birds, insects, flying things. Night, ghosts, the undead. Greater summons, sea, undines and water devils. Night, shadows and void things. Curious grimoire. So being introduction to the world of spells and items of power. So we've got lists of spells and items of power as well, you know, basically to your player characters to find and use. So quite, again, a lot of those. Before we get on to the actual spells by school, spells and then spell lists as well. And it's essentially quite a long list of those. And then fate is in my hands, and here's the rule. Here is the guidelines for your maze control. And essentially how to emulate exciting tales of swords and sorcery. And rulings over rules again come back to the OSR style of play. And even we've got other options here like a novella style of play, and then striking the balance between enemy and storyteller. It's always a kind of difficult one to learn when you are beginning as a referee. Keeping it weird tales. The maze is dark and deadly. All options on how to run this game, so pretty good range there. And then so we got again 4 sorts of adventure. Essentially here we're getting to the beginning of sort of like a proper adventure which you can throw at your players, and you're presenting aspects and roles to the players and questioning the party to really get them beginning and get finding out more about them. And then we have the door to adventure itself hanging there, ready for your player characters to leap up and grasp that handle. And then here we go. Everything is player facing. One of the biggest differences between Mazes and other polymorph titles and most traditional RPGs is that the Mazes is player facing. The player always is the active force in the fiction of the game. So again, it's a bit like a black hack where you are rolling to hit, and then you are rolling to avoid being hit when the enemy attacks. Sample monsters, so buckets of hazards, and then and then guide to using resources for the OSR, so you can adapt content to run with this as well. And then we have safety guidelines. Perhaps I would have liked those at the front of the book rather than the back. Might seem almost like a bit late to put these in there, but I'm glad they're in there nevertheless. And then we've got its own little Appendix N, essentially bibliography of further reading and things to watch and play. So yeah, that is Mazes from 9th level games. Now it's not the only thing that comes in that. It's actually quite a thick little package. So you have presumably nice little adventure, and then you have these different books which I will explore in further unboxings and review in due course as well. So yeah, looking forward to delving into that in more detail. So let's just type this up. So yeah, Mazes from 9th level games. So I hope you have enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, then please do click on the like button down below. And if you've got any comments or feedback, appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a box and a book or game which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching. I'll be back again soon with another one.